Hello everybody, King Wizard here again today with a few deck profiles. They're all going to be Fire Fist, but there's going to be three decks. The first one is going to be a 3.5 axis, the second is going to be a 4 axis, and the third is going to be a variation of the 4 axis build. Um, I really prefer a 3 axis or a 3.5 axis build over 4 axis because I really like combo oriented decks, and I really like how I really like the synergy of how the cards work. Like I really love how bringing out a horse prince, getting a horse prince gives you a rooster to help set up your next play, next turn, uh, or your next turn, and that's something that I really like. I feel like that's just really cool to me. Um, However, I do feel like the 4-axis build is a little bit more competitive versus meta decks, because it's not it doesn't get hurt as bad by effect negation in my opinion. Like in any point during the combo that you're gonna try to get off, uh, you could just normal summon your leopard and they can break through skill it or they can fiendish chain it and you're screwed really. If that was the only play that you had in your hand, then you're kind of stuck until you can make another play, until you draw into something to make another play. And I feel like that's um, not as prevalent in 4-axis build. Like effect negation doesn't hurt it as much. Um, but like I said, I really feel like 3-axis is more fun to me personally, and I like to put 3.5 axis. I like to run some 4-axis cards, I guess, to kind of not necessarily increase consistency, but to give the deck more options than just the 3-axis capabilities. I don't want that to literally be the only thing the deck has available to it. I want more versatility. Um, so I'm just going to go ahead and quit rambling and get into the deck. So to start off with the monsters, we have 2 Coach Soldier Wolfbark and 2 Fire Fist Bear. Bear is probably the best Fire Fist for level 4 Fire Fist monster, I should say. Um, for the 3 axes, we have 3 Roosters, 3 Spirit, 1 Hawk, and 3 Leopard. Um, I'm running the 1 Hawk because, late game, it's always good to have another target, and his effect to increase the attack by 500 is actually pretty good, which him just being on the board when you special him in defense will give him a 2k defense, so he might even last there for a while. And, that 500 attack boost can be the amount of attack that you might need to help run over certain monsters that could be considered either beat sticks or just cards that are hard to get over. Um, and then lastly, for the monsters, I'm running 2 Max C for fairly obvious reasons. Onto the spells, I have 1 Onslaught of the Fire Kings. This is a great card for like your opening hand if you're going second. Um, it's just great especially if you kind of sort of almost brick and you don't really have a play. Say you just drew a spirit and like one of these and some other random cards, you didn't draw a Tinky, uh, then as long as you're going second, and if they do summon a monster, you can onslaught, get out most likely a leopard because you don't really want to waste the rooster, and then normal summon the spirit, and then you can synchro, and then you can go into a rooster and then grab something else. It's a great play starter. It's also good in the late game if you just draw into it. It's a good top deck card almost. If your opponent has the upper hand, it could be a good top deck for you to almost come back from. Then I have 1 Rekindling. This card is definitely mandatory in a 3-axis build. Um, I really feel like when it was at 3, uh, it was fine. Like it kind of balanced itself out. I don't think it was too broken, because Spirit was at 1, so I feel like that really balanced it out. But now that Spirit is at 3, I feel like 1 Rekindling really balances it out as well. I feel like any more with Spirit at 3 would be pretty broken. Um, with with 2, I can't really think like I want to say at 2 it kind of would put this deck up to almost like tier 3 status, I guess, if that's a thing, or rogue. Um, but I don't know. I really don't know. Um, then I have 2 Pot of Dualities for consistency, 3 MSTs because back row removal is important in my opinion, and Gorilla isn't good enough to dedicate a monster slot to it. Um, 2 Tinsus for double summoning purposes, 3 Tinkeys for obvious reasons. Under the traps, we have 1 Solemn Warning, 1 Torrential Tribute, 3 Fiendish Chains, 3 Call of the Haunted, 2 Mind Crush, and 2 Breakthrough Skill. Now, as I've said in past videos, Mind Crush and Effect Negation are really good this format. Earlier yesterday, I had one of my first ever matches with a Battery Man deck against Necros, and I ended up winning the match mainly because of Fiendish Chain. Game 2 and 3, I won solely due to Fiendish Chain, pretty much. And so Effect Negation is extremely important against so many top tier decks at the moment. And Mind Crush is important because a lot of top decks search. You know, they're constantly searching. You know, Necros have a plethora of cards that search each other. You know, Satellar Knights have Deneb and Rhoda, and Cleese have Summoner's Art, and Burning Abyss has, I believe, Skarm. So almost all of the top decks search, so you know what's going to be in their hand if as long as you pay attention. So Mind Crush will hit that. Onto the extra deck, we have 3 Horse Prints. I have ran at two. Sorry, my bad. I'm stuttering. Don't really know why, but I've tried it at 2, and I don't really like it. I prefer it at 3 just because when this deck can grind pretty well because it has a decent amount of recycling capabilities. And it being at 2 really kind of sucks in the late game if you have a play, if you do manage to recycle some of your spirits, and you know you don't really have anything else to go into, and because you know you've already exhausted 2 of them, and it's very easy to get 2 horse prints out. So a third one really helps. And Vulcan the Divine is in there just for options mainly, if it's ever necessary. Then for the Xyz, we have, I'm going to go ahead and put the Fire Fist Xyz monsters first. 2 Lion Emperors, because it is really, again, I'm running 2 mainly for the late game, for grind games, I guess. If they happen to get over 1, it's always good to have another option, another one available. And then I have 1 Tiger King and 1 Cardinal. Definitely only running 1 Cardinal because the only way to go into it is 2 Bears, and I really don't feel like at that point that would be too optimal of a play, you know, wasting both of your Bears. And I don't feel like Tiger King needs another. I don't think he's necessary in this deck at 2. For the rest of the Xyz monsters, we have Heartland Draco, because, you know, this deck obviously does run a good amount of continuous spells. Castell, Diamond Direwolf, Exciting Knight, Digusto Emerald, Cowboy, and number 80. I feel like, for the most part, this is a pretty standard lineup of rank 4s. You know, maybe not in 3-axis builds. Most people probably wouldn't run Cardinal because, you know, the only way for this deck to go into it is with 2 Bears, and that's not too optimal of a play. But, you know, it's always good to have options, and there's not really much else, you know, that this deck can run in the extra. You know, it's not too tight of an extra deck. It's, you know, there's not much that you need to squeeze in there. For the side, we have 1 Defissure, 1 Macrocosmos, 1 Breakthrough Skill, 3 Imperial Iron Wall, 2 Light Imprisoning Mirrors, 3 Shadow Imprisoning Mirrors, 2 Pulling the Rug, and 2 Fairy Winds. I feel like that's a pretty standard side deck to this format, especially if you know, since you can run both Shadow and Light Imprisoning Mirrors, because it is a fire deck, it doesn't hit anything really. And Imperial Iron Wall is wonderful against Necros because, you know, they can't Valk and they can't Trish, and those are obviously probably the 2 biggest threats that Necros have. That, and they also can't get their spells back from the grave, or they can't activate their spells effects from the grave to add another one from their deck to their hand. So yeah, Imperial Iron Wall really shuts down Necros. And that's pretty much it for the 3.5 axis deck. On to the next one, which is a 4-axis Fire Fist deck. As you can see, I don't have the side deck built on here. I feel like this is kind of standard. The variant that I have, the second variant of the 4-axis build, is one that I might go into a little more detail about. So to start off, we have 3 Coach Soldier Wolfbark, 3 Bears, 1 Gorilla, 2 Boars, and 2 Dragon. Now, for the monsters, I feel like that's kind of standard for 4-axis, maybe not running Bears and, or not Bear, maybe not running Dragon and Boar, but I have my reasonings behind it, I guess. This build, I like the other variant a lot more. As I've said at the beginning of the video, I do prefer the 3.5 axis, but even the 4-axis variation I like more than this build. Then I'm running 2 Summoner Monks for just generic rank 4 plays. Then I have 2 Onslaught of the Fire Kings. I'm running this card mainly because when I first started playing Fire Fists, it was kind of a budget Fire Fist deck, so I obviously didn't have the money for Coach Soldier Wolfbark, and I kind of had to make up for that in some way. And one of the best ways was to run Onslaught and run Boars. It was a great, easy way to make synchros. And that was something that really helped push the deck, really helped me get to that competitive level almost, or that, the viability that the deck would need. Obviously, it wasn't as good or consistent as just a 1 Coach Soldier Wolfbark, but at the time, I didn't want to waste $30 to $60 or even potentially $90 on a playset for a deck that I know even at the time wasn't tier 1 or anything like that. So Onslaught of the Fire Kings really kind of holds this sentiment to me. It has a lot of value in that way. I know it's not the best card for the deck, I guess, optimally, but again, it's not a terrible card. It does have its value, not only in practice, but it has sentimental value to me as well. And then I'm running 2 Pot of Duality for consistency, 3 MSTs, 3 Tensus, 2 Gyokos, and 3 Tenkis. Now, Gyoko can be a very good card against certain decks, but honestly, I really don't like it. Out of all of the cards in Fire Fist / Fire Formation archetype, this is probably my least favorite card, because I really feel like MST just outclasses it, and it is one of the main reasons why I do run it is to have more targets to trigger Dragon's effect. Other than that, I really feel like it's not very good of a card. Sure, you can lock one of your opponent's back rows with it, but if they MST it, then you know what, that back row then becomes live again. And I mean, it's always been something that to me, I just don't. I've always felt MST outclasses it, and I think even at one point in real life, I'd cut it down to 0, because I just didn't like the card that much. Now onto the traps. I'll come back to these first 2, but I'm just gonna go into the pretty standard lineup, I guess. I'm running 3 Fiendish Chain, 3 Call of the Haunted, 2 Tintin, 1 Torrential Tribute, and 1 Solemn Warning. Now, I am running Tintin, which I know some people don't do, but I really like the card, the fact that it's searchable, and the fact that it almost acts like an Honest. Really, I really like that aspect. I think it really helps. It really helps the deck be more competitive, in my opinion. It really helps you to run over certain cards, or really, it's just all around a good, decent card, in my opinion. Now, for the first 2 cards, I'm running 2 copies of the Transmigration Prophecy. The main reason for this is I don't feel like 4-axis builds have the recycling capabilities that 3-axis does. Um, and that's something that I really kind of wanted to do. And on top of that, Transmigration Prophecy can potentially also be used offensively because you can shuffle cards in your opponent's graveyard back into their deck as well. Um, Now it's definitely more of like a mid to late game card, and so it kind of sucks to open with it, I guess. But it's definitely not a bad card. I need to do more testing with it because for the most part, this is just theorio here. This is just conceptual. I think on paper it's a lot more solid than it really could be. Um, but it's definitely something that I think could be really good. Now, onto the variation of this deck. As you can see, there's quite a noticeable shift in how the deck is played. If you notice in the other version, since I am running Summoner Monk, I am running more spells to help justify running said Summoner Monk. Um, and in this version, I cut out Summoner Monk and I cut out some spells and decided to run more traps. And there's a reason for that too. It's the same monster lineup except for 2 Maxis in place of the Summoner Monk. 2 Onslaughts, 2 MSTs, 2 Tensus, 1 Gyoko, and 3 Tenkis. The trap lineup is almost the same except I'm running 1 more Tenten and I'm running 2 Tenkins. This is because I'm running 2 Magic Planters. Now, I really got introduced to this card in Batteryman because Batteryman runs a decent amount of, at least my build, runs Call of the Haunted, Fiendish Chain, and Powerful Rebirth. So, there's a lot of targets to make Magic Planter live, and my build also runs Summoner Monk, so it's a good target for Summoner Monk as well. It's an easy target for it. But I feel like in this deck it's even more live because, I'm running 3 Fiendish Chain, 3 Calls, 3 Tensins, and 3 Tenkins. So, again, and both Tensin and Tenkin are searchable by Dragon, but just by activating, say, a Tenki. So, you could open Dragon, Tenki, and Magic Planter, and then normal summon the Dragon, play Tenki, search Bear, and then search this Tenkin or a Tensin. And later on, if you need to, activate it and then draw 2 by activating Planter. And this is something that, again, it does need more testing to see how practical it is. But I really think that it'll be pretty solid. I don't think, I have more faith in it and I think it's going to be more consistent than running Transmigration Prophecy, if that helps put it into perspective. Now, as I've said, I do really like Onslaught, so all 3 of these builds run it. And part of the reason why I do love Fire Fist is one of my favorite archetypes. And I definitely I like playing both versions of the deck, both 3-axis and 4-axis. And I guess this is kind of the story time. I've quit and picked Yu-Gi-Oh back up so many times during my life, mainly through my teenage years, and I never actually joined a tournament until right after Dragon Rulers were banned, pretty much, or the babies, right after the babies were banned, and people were running around, people were making plant synchros and blue eye, or not plant synchros, my bad, plant rulers and blue eyes rulers were, people were just kind of struggling to find out, what's like the most consistent variant that they can still run rulers in. And that's kind of when that's when I picked up the game, and that's really when I started to get really competitive into the game. And I was still kind of a budget player at the time, and I had picked up Fire Fist because they were really cheap. I think I had built the entire deck for maybe $80. That's including the extra. And the side deck. So the entire deck, the main, extra, and the side deck for maybe $80. And the first tournament I joined was at a locals, and I placed 4th. And to me, that really meant something to me. You know, my first ever actual tournament play in real life. You know, the only other people that I faced were my brother, and we'd play. You know, we learned each other's decks. We knew our decks inside and out. So, you know, it wasn't the same. You know, it's not like dueling somebody you know what they're running. You know, dueling all these random decks that these people are running, and placing fourth in my first ever real life tournament with a budget version of a deck, not even fully up to par, really meant something to me. It really, you know, it really gave me a lot of confidence in the deck, and it made me really like the deck and how it functions. Now at the time, it was, I believe, that first deck was a 4-axis. I don't believe it was 3-axis. I know at one point I did end up playing a 3-axis variant with, you know, when Spirit was at 1, but I didn't like it, so I went back to 4. Um, you know, Spirit being at 1 was really limiting. Um, but yeah, I went back to 4, but that first time I believe was with the 4-axis version, uh, more similar to probably this variant. Um, because I do remember running Gyoko and the double Fire Kings. I didn't run Summoner Monk. I do believe I also ran one what's the other Fire Fist? Caribou. Yeah, I believe I also ran one Caribou. I know I also ran double Gorilla and 3 Bears. I could have also ran 3 Gorilla. I'm not entirely sure. I know my MST count was a lot lower. But yeah, so Fire Fist really hold this sentiment to me for that reason. You know, my first ever tournament, and it was only a locals, and there were only about maybe 20 to 30 people there, but placing fourth out of those people, and you know, when it came down to the last rounds, you know, people would run the meta, and I did. I think it was that day, but I beat a Blue Eyes Dragon Roller for like my fourth place match, or for the match that gave me fourth place. Um, I think that's what it was. It's been a while. Obviously, it's been like 2 years since then. But yeah. So Fire Fists really hold this value to me. I just don't know really if I'll ever like stop playing them in any way. You know, I feel like I'm always gonna have uh, some variant built, and even, you know, if they don't if they don't ever really become top tier again or anything of the sort, I don't really care. I'll still probably try to play them in some way, even as a rogue deck. As you can tell, I'm also a very casual player. I do have a lot of casual decks built, so it's not an issue. I feel like Fire Fists are just always gonna be there for me. So yeah, um, thanks for watching. If you like the video, please thumb it up. Please leave a comment if you have general tips, or you just have to say something, whatever. Uh, if you want to get in contact with me, you can send me a message over YouTube or on Pojo. If you check out my channel description on YouTube, I do have my Pojo username on there. So if you want, you can send me a message on Pojo. Whatever, however you want to get in contact with me, it's cool. See you guys later.